Earlier this week, Bungie announced that Marathon would be delayed from its September 23rd release date until some point next year. This announcement was fairly expected. A lot of people have been hoping Marathon would be delayed so that Bungie can have more time to work on it. So while that should be good news, reading through the announcement itself, I'm not so convinced. A lot of the changes they said they're going to use the delay to work on seem very vague, and honestly a lot of it is stuff I expected before the September launch anyway. We'll now have to wait until later this year to get any more additional news on the game, which is a little worrying because we still haven't heard much about the endgame. They do mention in this article that the game will have raid-like endgame encounters, and we know from creators like Scaro that Bungie has at least discussed the endgame in preview events. But the biggest thing that's caught my attention is a tweet posted by Bungie Leaks earlier today, suggesting that Bungie employees didn't even know about the delay until it was publicly announced. This unfortunately isn't too surprising. Bungie higher-ups have a tendency not to tell their own workers about what's going on in the company, especially when it comes to layoffs. But what concerns me is the article itself mentions they had a discussion with the development team about the delay. And what this means is that either Bungie Leaks is wrong about the info, which to be fair is possible, or the article itself is lying to us. I'm not interested in arguing which way is right and which way is wrong, purely because it's impossible for us to know unless stated by somebody officially working at Bungie. But there is a lot more evidence to suggest that this wasn't discussed with the team, especially with the lack of information given in the article itself. And all this news is coming out only a few days after the entertainment head at Sony was interviewed about Marathon, talking about how the feedback for the game had been varied. Now look, I'm very interested in Marathon. I wasn't before the reveal event, but after seeing it and getting to play it for myself during the alpha, I do think there's something here, it just needs a bit more work. So in that regard, I am happy it's being delayed. I much prefer a delayed game that's going to come out great compared to a rushed game that gets fixed later. My concern is less with the delay itself and more the way that Bungie themselves have gone about implementing the delay. If they are still continuing to not discuss these decisions with their development team, then it tells us immediately that still nothing has changed with the higher-ups at the company. They're not making decisions based on what the development team think is best, what the development team needs, or what the development team wants to do, and instead are making decisions based on business only. And that's why I think this delay isn't a good sign for Destiny. If the Bungie higher-ups are unwilling to change and Sony is not willing to get rid of them, I fear Bungie's just going to keep hitting the same mistakes over and over again that they have for the last few years. And that is a lot of speculation, I'll admit that now. I do not think you should be making decisions about any Bungie product based on this information, but I do think this is something you should be aware of and something for us to keep an eye on. The other thing that worries me is I was excited for Bungie to have another game alongside Destiny. An extraction shooter wouldn't have been my first choice, but after the failure of Lightfall and all the backlash the company got afterwards, a second game that they can financially fall back on is a good idea. Regardless of your interest in Marathon, the more successful it is, the better that is for Destiny. I'm not saying you have to buy Marathon or support it if you want Destiny to do well. I think the smartest thing to do right now is to keep an open mind both for Destiny and Marathon, and wait and see what happens as these games progress. If you are unsure about Edge of Fate or the Year of Prophecy, that's fine. Wait until these expansions release and see the community reception for yourself before you decide. And the same will be true for Marathon when it eventually launches. But if all the information we have from this is true, I am worried about what this says for the future of Bungie as a company. If the higher-ups don't change, whether that's changing their ways or leaving the company, we're just going to keep going in the same direction, and Bungie as a company, I don't think can afford to do that anymore. I don't like making these more negative discussion videos, but I think it's important to be aware and open about this kind of information. If you have any thoughts, let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next video.